Tired of doing investment research on stock markets? Wants to go for a walk outside the house with a friend? Introducing iCapital, where you can get investment advice on the go. It is accessible via app and website. Subscribe now to iCapital for stock news. iCapital is reliable because they thoroughly research listed companies, economies, and stock markets. iCapital provides a clear perspective of how markets interact and how it influences your investment. When investors and traders are debating whether to buy or sell their stocks, fret not, as iCapital will recommend Malaysian and global stocks. iCapital is available on Apple App Store, Google Play Store, and Huawei App Gallery.
Hi everyone. Teng Boo from Capital Dynamics again. Good to see you all after the Chinese New Year break, where all of us hopefully had a good rest. But if you notice, if you had been traveling or going out during those festive period, the weather was exceptionally hot. Wherever you are, during the Chinese New Year period, I was in Kuala Lumpur, and around the office area, it was 35, 36 degrees during lunchtime. And you could see, there were a lot of tourists, European tourists, tourists from China, from Asian countries, and you could see that a lot of them were suffering, within quotation marks, within inverted commas, suffering from the heat, because some of them were wearing hat, carrying umbrella, and they look very thirsty. So welcome again, and this time our topic is simple. The weather all over the world has been crazy. You will notice that this is a continuation of what has been happening over the years, particularly since the last few years. And if you remember, June 2023, it's confirmed that June 2023 was the hottest June on record. And June 2023 was followed by the hottest July ever recorded. And if that is not enough, it was followed by the hottest August on record. There's 3 months in a row, and then it wasn't sufficient. September 2023 was the hottest September ever recorded. And this is what climate change is, October 2023 again was the hottest year in 125,000 years. And it's the sequence where one hot month is followed by another hot month is unprecedented. Then October was followed by November. It was again the hottest November ever recorded. And then, of course, December, it was 2.57 degrees Fahrenheit or 1.43 degrees Celsius above the average recorded in the 20th century. In short, it was the warmest December on record. So, you would have thought that that's enough, because it cannot continue like that. Anyway, 2023 ended as the hottest year on record for the entire year, right? And it is only 2023. If you go back and look at the records, the 10 warmest years since 1880, were the most recent 10 years, from 2014 to 2023. One hot year after another hot year. So what do you want to do? This is unprecedented, and the trend continued. If you remember, January 2024 was again the hottest January on record. And then, if that is not enough, we had February 2024 continued the unprecedented number of hottest month. Looks like 2024 may end up to be another hottest year for planet Earth. This is unbelievable. You know, it's really unbelievable. You find that last year was the first time, right, for the whole 12 months, was the first time where the world weather breached the 1.5 degrees Celsius. That was the limit set, right? So 2023 was the first time that the weather throughout the world breached that 1.5 degrees Celsius limit. As I said, you know, I've talked quite a bit about climate change in the past. And I think previously asked all our viewers to imagine what it would be like if global warming reaches 2 degrees Celsius or even 3 degrees Celsius. Now it's only about 1.5, 1.52. So can you imagine if it's going to reach 2 degrees, 3 degrees warming? A lot of places in the world would be unbearable. A lot of lifestyles, the way you live, the way you play, the way you work will change in a manner that's probably beyond your control, beyond your management, because nature has taken over. Finally, because humankind has ignored the laws of nature for so long that nature now is taking its revenge. And we, as very fallible human beings, what can we do? You cannot. People always talk about digital transformation, that kind of nonsense. I don't believe in all those where using a smartphone is better than using paper. You know, that's all a lot of bullshit. And then they come up with all kinds of technology solutions, use EV, try to find planes that can fly on hydrogen fuel. It's not going to work. I don't believe that it's going to work, and I'm a very convinced believer that global warming is happening at an accelerating rate. Let me just share this very scary diagram with you, video with you. This is data visualization where it shows you from 1880 year by year that the climate on planet Earth has been rising and rising, and it stops at 2023. This is true the 12 months of a year, but if you look at it, whether it's January, July or December, in whatever season, average temperature has been rising. And it's going to continue rising. That's the scary part. So, in terms of climate change, Malaysia, up to now, has been luckier than many other countries. I mean, we live in a hot, humid country, wet country, and in some ways, Malaysia has not suffered as badly as many other countries have. I mean, we know how hot the weather was. We know there was a bit of flooding in the last couple of months. But if you read what has happened in other countries. For example, Japan. In 2023, they really suffered a lot of the impact, the negative impact of climate change. I just read this, the experience of this person. He works at an organization called Hoto Plus. It is a non-profit NGO that works with economically vulnerable Japanese, ordinary Japanese, right? And he says that the single most frequent consultations that they receive from the ordinary Japanese in 2023 was about not being able to use their air condition. Why? Well, according to this person, Takanori Fujita, he says that they cannot use their air condition because of costs, rising costs. And they can't go to the hospitals in Japan to get treatment because of rising costs. So he has been working in the NGO for 20 years. He says when he started work in this Hoto Plus 20 years ago, they have never received this type of complaints, this type of inquiries, this type of consultations. And the trouble is, although the Japanese government provides assistance, subsidies, the people who are in need, most in need of this type of subsidies and aids, don't receive them. And Mr. Fujita says they even get consultations from hospitals in Japan asking them what to do about ordinary Japanese who collapse from heat stroke and ending up hospitalized without having the ability to pay. I'm just quoting you one single example of what has happened in a country like Japan, which is a wealthy, developed country. You know, you always think of the nice scenery and so on and so forth, but this is what it is like on a day-to-day basis. And then, you know, we thought that we can use renewable energy, wind, solar, to help reduce climate change, the global warming. But the trouble is, as the weather, as the temperature gets warmer and warmer, your solar panels will degrade faster, especially in areas which are hot and humid. So that means their lifetime, their life cycles are much shorter. So you find that all over the world, the impact of global warming is becoming a lot more frequent. It's very pervasive. It has spread through every corner of our day-to-day living. Now is today is February 22nd, which is supposedly towards the end of summer in Australia. But guess what? In Victoria, you got huge wildfires in Victoria near Ballarat. I'm not there physically, but I watch on news. I could see the fire. The speed that the fire spread was scary. It was so fast. And the people there around the area around Ballarat in Victoria, they were traumatized. So for us in Malaysia, 32, 33, 34, 35 degrees Celsius, you go out in the sun, it's freaking hot. But that's about it. You can go back to your house, go back to your shopping mall, go back to your office, and you get air conditioned, right? So I think in that sense, so far Malaysians have not gotten the huge, serious impact of global warming. And now it's late February. right? In many parts of China, in Beijing, for example, they're still having heavy snows, having snowfalls, blizzards. In many parts of China, they're still having very extreme cold weather, which is unheard of. So we are always told, that the culprit is gasoline cars, or using too many air conditions, or even our clothes. Textiles is one of the biggest culprit of climate change, of environmental deterioration. Right? But there's one player that has been overlooked, a major player that has contributed tremendously to CO2 emission, to destruction of the environment, and people are not aware, most people are not aware of it, and most people do not know that this environmental polluter, this climate change enabler is all over the world. Its presence can be found all over the world. Who am I referring to? I'm referring to the US Defense Department, the US military. The US military, that single institution, produces more carbon dioxide. This is a few years ago, because it's very hard to get data, especially recent data, up-to-date data on the pollution that the US military is producing. It's very hard to get. Even if you go under the freedom of information and so on and so forth, it's difficult. Nevertheless, based on the data in 2017, the US military alone produces more carbon dioxide than Morocco, Peru, Sweden, Hungary, Finland, Norway, Switzerland. A single department in the US government produces more carbon dioxide than an entire country. So, if you look at it, it shows that on a per capita basis, right, the US military, again, this data, this is not so bad, this is more recent, but I wish I can get more up-to-date data. Anyway, if you look at the chart, it shows that the US military alone produces 42 metric tons, right? Now, other countries, the United States as a whole produces only 15. And United Kingdom as a country as a whole produces 5 metric tons, EU 6, China 7. So the US military on a per capita basis is the single largest producer of carbon dioxide. But how many people are aware of this? How many people are aware that every time, I will share with you, it's not just the US military, because when the US military act in a certain way, the other side will respond. For example, in the Ukrainian crisis, right? You get so many different parties involved in the conflict, right? Or if you have in the Afghanistan war, or in the current Red Sea crisis, which is basically triggered by the Israel-Palestinian crisis. So the US will send their military weapons, their warships, their missiles, the other side will respond. So the pollution, the environmental destruction from the US military must also take into account the response from the opposite side. But anyway, let's focus on the key point first. So this is very interesting for us, for all of us on planet Earth, to take climate change seriously. You need to shrink the US military. You need to shrink the US Defense Department. The US defense spending is very soon, it hasn't hit $1 trillion yet. It's very soon going to reach there. US alone, the spending on defense and military for US alone is equivalent to the next largest 9 spenders. It is like 4 times larger than what China is spending. And if you combine Russia, UK, Germany and all that, then only, if you take 9 of these countries, then only you be equal to what the US alone is spending on their defense, on their military. So we've got to shrink that, right? As this article wrote, is from Time magazine. Military vehicles, along with the forces, the soldiers that use them, and the industries that supply them, don't forget, you need factories to produce them, you need to go to the mountain to mines and so on, represent a huge climate problem because they account for 5% of the world's carbon emissions every year. This is on a yearly basis. What about on a cumulative basis? And there's no bigger actor in this military space than the US military, which sucks up more petroleum than any other institution on earth to fly their fighter jets, to hit buildings and ferry food and supplies to 750 military bases across the world. That's a lot of environmental destruction. And that's coming just from the US military. Let's take a look at some photos to give you a visual impact. This, and by the way, many of these military vehicles, they use diesel. You know diesel? It's got a lot of smoke, it emits a lot of black smoke. And can you imagine how many military vehicles there are in this photo alone? Next. So, again, the data is a bit outdated, but nevertheless, it gives you a bit of perspective. In 2017, the US Air Force alone purchased $4.9 billion worth of fuel. The US Navy bought $2.8 billion, the Army almost $1 billion, and the US Marine a lot less, 36 million. Right? And what they have found is that there's a project in Brown University called the Cost of Wars Project. They studied the cost of war at Brown University. They found out that US military pollution accounted for 1.2 billion metric tons of greenhouse emissions, which is equivalent to what is produced by 257 million passenger cars per year. That's a lot of cars. The whole of China has only about 300 million cars. My God. I mean, how many of us know these facts? Let's take a look at another graphic illustration. This is the US fighter jets, right? And this article from a very respectable Australian publication called The Conversation. The US military is a bigger polluter than as many as 140 countries. And this article says shrinking this war machine is a must. I hope that the message is put across that we have overlooked, because we talk about smartphones, we talk about digital transformation, we talk about electronic vehicles and so on and so forth, but we forgot this huge culprit which is under no pressure to shrink and therefore help prevent or slow down global warming. You know, it's not just all these fighter jets and all those things and all those warships and all those tanks, military vehicles that you see.
Why are there so many US bases on this island in Japan? The Battle of Okinawa was one of the bloodiest Pacific combats of World War II. The US-led campaign lasted 82 days and killed tens of thousands of Okinawans. Up to 70,000 Japanese soldiers and 12,000 American soldiers were also killed. And the US military has had an extensive presence on the island ever since. Okinawa Prefecture is home to more than 70% of US military bases in the country. It's a strategic location for the US, being close to Taiwan, China, and the Korean Peninsula. The bases are controversial. Local women have been raped by US servicemen, leading to mass protests. People are also worried about aircraft crashes, pollution, and excessive noise. The US and Japan agreed to relocate the Marine Corps Air Station Futenma, which is precariously located in the middle of a metropolitan city, by moving it to the small fishing village of Henoko. But even moving the base is causing problems. An overwhelming majority of Okinawans oppose the move, saying it'll disrupt the local community and hurt the endangered dugong and coral reef in the area.
Nita Crawford, a co-director of the Cause of War project at Brown University, says that the US, as I mentioned earlier, has about 750 to 800 military bases all over the world. But that does not include 700 over bases on American home soil. In its American own territory, it's got 700 over military bases, right? And the Pentagon itself says that the US Army operates too many bases. It doesn't need so many bases. The pollution, the environmental impact is not just, the Air Force will produce air pollution, the warships will produce water pollution, right? But if you look at the history of the US military, they've been conducting nuclear weapon tests in South Pacific Islands and in the Navajo Indian Reservation in America, in continental America itself. And that has caused tremendous, not just destroying the areas around where the nuclear tests were done, but the biodiversity was affected, and the gases that they release, the fluids that they release from this test are all radioactive. So you have to take into account this kind of land pollution coming from US military activities. And what they found out is that the US military bases, those within US itself and those outside US, rank as some of the most polluted in the world. This is because they have a huge amount of toxic chemicals which are found to contaminate drinking water, the soil, and so on and so forth. And a lot of the land used by the US military bases, by the US military, is wasted because they have a lot of abandoned military sites that are no longer in use. And these abandoned military sites are also said to be contaminated. According to John Dingell, a retired Michigan congressman and a war veteran, he told Newsweek magazine in 2014, almost every military site in America is seriously contaminated. So, my message is simple. I think if you take into account not just the US military, but how the adversaries, real or imagined, respond to the actions of the US military, then the impact on their environment, the impact on climate change is even greater. So I guess what should we do? Not Don't use smartphones. I mean, like I told you, I'm a believer in paper. EV may solve part of it. Air condition, how? If you live in tropical country, how can you not have air condition? Or instead of eating so much meat-based food, eat more plant-based food. But every solution that we have leads to some kind of new problem. For example, don't use paper, use digital, but this is worse. This creates more environmental destruction than this. But when it comes to the military, I think there's one solution that has no side effects. Let's have global peace. We have to work towards global peace, which can help slow down climate change, so that once you have global peace, you move towards that direction, then you can reduce all the number of warplanes, number of warships, the number of military trucks. All those things can be reduced. The military bases, instead of having 800 military bases in the world, why must you guys have so many? Do you mean you have so many enemies in the world? Does the United States have so many enemies that you got the military bases in 80 countries? Why can't you be more peaceful? Why can't you be more friendly to people? So you can shut down all your military bases and reduce all the pollution. Global peace. Not only will it make us all happier, less stressful, but it will make climate change a less threatening problem. I hope you have learned something from our session today. I hope you will like and share what we have said, because some of the facts that I've shared with you are not really known to a lot of people or not appreciated, and we need to spread this message more so that something seriously can be done to reduce all the sources of global warming. We all have a role to play. So I'm playing my little role here. As I've said, I've talked about climate change many times before, and I have to bring this up again, because the one thing that has sort of become a victim of geopolitical tension and so on and so forth is that the world community has sort of pushed aside dealing with climate change. Well, we will see 10 years, 20 years, 30 years from now, which I've shown in another diagram, shown in another session. There was a forecast made how Malaysia would look like in about 25, 30 years from now, where many parts of Malaysia would be underwater because of rising sea level, where Alor will become an island, where Malacca will be underwater, and so on and so forth. And in the Klang Valley area, the coastline, water would have, seawater level would have risen so much that the coastline will move inwards as far as almost to Subang Jaya. So we'll see whether 20, 30 years from now, whether all this will come true or whether we can do something. So, like I said, please like and share, and if you have any comments, write to us, write in our social media, and if you have any topics that you want us to discuss, let us know. Have a good weekend. Thank you.